welcome back. Today I'm going to be making a mushroom soup. And I quite often make these pureed vegetable soups, of which the base is bone broth, a vegetable, and an herb. So in today's case, the ingredients are bone broth, mushrooms, and thyme. But you can basically do this with any vegetable and herb that you like, any combination that you like. So I very often will do bone broth, tomato, basil, or bone broth, carrot, dill, or whatever it is that you want. But this is a great way to get bone broth into the diet and to also get these amazing herbs. Today we're using thyme. And thyme is great because it helps fight infections. It can help ward off colds, treat sore throats, any coughs or chest complaints. It is antifungal and also has a tonic effect on the body. So it's just a great thing to always be adding into your diet any chance that you can. This is a very simple recipe. Basically, all I'm gonna do is cook these mushrooms in this bone broth and puree it. So I have an immersion blender. This is one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. I like it because it simplifies blending. If you don't have one of these, that's totally fine. You can put everything into a blender, blend it, and then pour it back into the pot. But if you have an immersion blender, then you can just stick it directly in and puree it in that pot. It's just less dishes. So today we're gonna get started by cleaning off these mushrooms. I have here some shiitake mushrooms and some lion's mane mushrooms. Mushrooms cannot be washed. And so you just really hope that they're not very dirty. And if they are, your only option is really to wipe them off with a towel. Luckily, these lion's mane mushrooms are quite clean, but there's a little bit of dirt on some of these, which I will just sort of wipe off with a towel. If you add a bunch of water to these mushrooms, then when you put them in the pot, they're going to boil rather than frying, and it just takes the flavor and makes it all wrong. So I'm gonna grab a pot. I love this because it's just a one pot recipe. This is the only dish we're gonna have to do. So I'm gonna start by putting some butter here on the bottom. Always find grass-fed butter if you can. Now this is 1 stick of butter. Okay. And then we will start adding our mushrooms. So basically you just want to rough chop these. You want them all to be about the same size. That way they'll all cook evenly. And so these shiitakes are about this size. And so I'm going to cut the lion's mane mushroom to be a similar size. And then I'll just throw them directly into this pot with our butter. Lion's mane mushrooms are so popular these days for all of their help with cognition and memory and whatnot, but we never actually think to use them for food. They're such a superfood, and it's such a great way to get this into your system, and it's delicious. Mushrooms absorb any flavor that they're surrounded by, which is why I'm choosing butter, because they will just taste like butter, which is just about the most delicious flavor in the world. All right, let me get some of these shiitakes and see if I need to clean any of them off. They look pretty clean. I'm lucky. Sometimes you can get a batch of really dirty mushrooms and it'll take you an hour. Swipe them all off. Now it's very important when you are cooking mushrooms that you don't add salt. Because if you do, it'll draw out all of the moisture in the mushrooms, and then again, it will boil instead of frying, and this screws up the consistency. You can salt them after they've been cooked, but for now, we're just going to pepper our mushrooms. So now I'm going to take this over to the stove. We're going to cook this on a high heat, because I want these mushrooms to brown and fry. We want that butter to melt, and then we're gonna stir it right at the beginning to try to get an even coating of butter all over each mushroom. So you wanna get to stirring right away. The mushrooms will absorb so much butter. And so if you see that they're starting to dry out and they're not frying and they're starting to stick to the bottom, that's your cue to add more butter. So right now I'm just stirring them constantly to try to get an even distribution of the butter between all the mushrooms. And then if I see one is a little bit bigger than the others, I'll use my spatula to cut it in half so that all of these will cook at the same time. So now I feel like I have an even distribution, and I'm just gonna leave it for a minute. And I want everything on that bottom layer to turn brown. So now I can see that these are starting to brown. I'm trying to just toss these all over to get them to brown on the other side. So I have some fresh thyme here from the garden, and basically you have two options. You can take your time and try to sort of peel the leaves off and throw it in the pot. But sometimes these little thyme stems are just too delicate to do that. So if you find that your thyme leaves aren't easily being pulled off, your stem's just breaking in half, then you can just throw that whole stem in. But then some of these stems are going to be quite woody, and that you are not going to want to put in your soup. Make sure you scrape that off. But these bits here with these soft, those stems can just go in, because everything is going to get pureed together in here. So the great thing about this recipe is you put in as much thyme as you want. I'm hoping that you will learn how thymy you like your mushroom soup and make that decision for yourself. You can choose whatever mushrooms you like. You can choose a different herb altogether. You could do rosemary, sage, oregano, anything you wanted. So for me, I like a thymy soup. So I'm really going to go for it. So you want this thyme to be able to cook with the mushrooms for a little bit, but if you put it in at the beginning, it just burns, and then you sort of lose the flavor and some of the effectiveness of the medicine. All right, that looks good. Now I'm going to stir my mushrooms with their thyme. So you can see how much these mushrooms have cooked down. Most of the moisture has been cooked out of them. And so at this point, you can add salt. Mushrooms will take a little bit more salt than other vegetables. So I basically do a light dusting, but evenly coating a layer of the mushrooms. All right, now you can see here that the mushrooms are browned on all sides. They all look cooked. My thyme has wilted, and I can really smell it. And now is the time that we add the bone broth. So here again, you have the decision. How thick do you want your soup? And that is how much bone broth that you should put in. I like a relatively thick soup. So right away, once you pour the bone broth in, you want to take your spatula and scrape the bottom. Because at this point, the pan will release all of the brown bits from the bottom once the cooler bone broth has touched the piping hot pan. And those little brown mushroom bits are going to create a lot of flavor for your soup. So you can always add more bone broth, but you can't take it away. At this point, if you have a blender, you can dump all of the contents of this pot into a blender, blend it, and then pour it back in. I happen to have this immersion blender, and so I'm just going to stick it right in here and blend from over top. All right, I'm going to move this to a lower temperature. These are preset burners. So this is the point where you check for consistency and flavor. So see how mine has just a little bit of chunk in it? That's how I prefer it. But I've noticed that when I'm cooking for children, they like it to be a lot smoother, and so I would continue to puree it until it's a really, really fine. And then this is when we taste basically for salt. So be mindful that it's hot. I'm gonna add a little more salt. And this is totally a personal preference. All right. I bet that's gonna do it. Yep, perfect. Mushroom soup should definitely be served hot. So I'm gonna spoon some of this into the bowl. If I were to garnish this, I'd do it with a little bit of creme fraiche and a little more fresh thyme on the top. And there you go. Thanks for joining me.